For the next hour, you'll be leaving the Show Me state and entering the Show Me the Money state. So stop what you're doing, grab a pen, and get ready to learn. Randy and Jake Floyd of Floyd Financial Group will be your guides for straight talk and honest answers about living the life you deserve in retirement. So prepare to be empowered. Now, here are your Show Me the Money hosts, Randy Floyd, Jake Floyd, and Jeff Shade.
Good morning. Thank you so much. Welcome to Show Me the Money with Randy and Jake Floyd, the show that gives you the straight talk and honest answers you need to reach your wealth management and retirement goals through smart investing and careful planning. On today's show, we're going to be discussing current events, and we'll talk about 6 cash flow mistakes that many baby boomers are making with their retirement saving and how to avoid them. Also, why AI alone doesn't cut it for financial planning, and finally, 6 effective strategies to help keep your heirs from blowing their inheritance and ensure your legacy is used wisely. My name's Jeff Shade, and as always, I'm just here to ask the questions with the words of wisdom and solid advice. They come from Randy and Jake Floyd of Floyd Financial Group. I will start with you, Jake. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing great, Jeff. Thanks for asking.
Randy, how's this Saturday morning treating you?
You know, it's really, really good, Jeff. I'm just happy to be here, and I'm a little extra hungry this morning. I did a heavier workout than normal.
Yeah.
I remember some of those workouts you used to do, Randy, and I mean, you would burn like 3,000 calories in the morning. You said, now I can eat anything I want for the rest of the day. I think that's a very good way to do it. Well, anyway, Randy, glad to have you with us here as always. We've got a lot to talk about on today's show. We're going to start with current events. The Fed has a governor. It's Waller. I understand he's one of about 12 different governors. But he says that there is a possibility that we could have rate hikes according to a recent poll. But I understand Fed Chair Powell says that we may have rate cuts this year. Which do you think is accurate?
Yeah, well, you know, over the past week in the news were lots of commentaries and things on that. We've seen that GDP has slowed down. They were predicting 2.2%. They're thinking now maybe 1.6 for the year 2025. Looking back over our shoulder, we had seen wage increases since COVID. In fact, a lot of times as people were moving around taking new jobs during COVID, you remember, Jeff, that people were quitting jobs. What were they calling it? Quiet quitting or something?
Yeah, exactly.
People were moving around and collecting 15% wage increases versus those that stayed around at 7%. But we still saw over the last 5 years or so, wages in a lot of places are up 35, 40%. And now they say that's trending down a little bit, where it's calming down. Wages are not moving up quite so quickly. But we have also looked at inflation being at 2.1 the last time we looked here over our shoulder, and that is right near the Fed's mandate. So if we do truly have a little bit of a slowing gross domestic product and inflation is low, now, this same gentleman you talked about, Mr. Waller, was talking about inflation might be 6%. I think he's looking at impact of tariffs across the board. I don't know how anybody can predict that. And, of course, none of that's actually happened yet. But I'm going to say Jerome is going to stand pat unless we get trade deals and things. I mean, it could happen that he would do that. But also we got this tax bill to still get finished up. You know, we'll see what happens by the end of this month or to the 4th of July.
Right, and I think that's what we're calling the Great Big Beautiful Bill. Is that the one you're talking about?
The Great Big Beautiful Bill.
I know. This is the Great Big Beautiful Show here on the radio with Floyd Financial Group. I think we're going to rename it there. But this was a poll, apparently, in which consumers thought that inflation would be 6%. But you're right, it is closer to about 2.1%. If these higher tariffs do go through, there's some higher taxes. Inflation could go up a little bit, but I do not think it's going to be persistent. So right now that we're at 2.1%, finally, do you think there's any excuse that Jerome Powell will give for not lowering interest rates?
Well, the economy seems to be chugging along pretty well. There's been a lot of people saying, well, you know, corporate earnings are going to go down. Well, they haven't. They've actually gone up. Mm-hmm. So we don't have that situation that a lot of people thought was going to play out. And then a lot of the forecasting, yes, there have been some companies that have decided, well, we won't forecast for that next quarter, but there's been a lot that have given pretty solid guidance, and the earnings could be really strong all the way through the rest of this year. And if they are, that might give him pause. It just depends on what we see with inflation along with if we have strong corporate earnings.
If we do have a rate cut this year, Randy, I know that he said we may have several rate cuts. Do you forecast those or expect those to be maybe a quarter of a percent, something like that, 0.5%?
Yeah, I don't foresee them being huge moves. I don't foresee him coming out like he did. When was that, Jake? When he came out and one day he dropped rates 2%.
It was during COVID.
I don't foresee that type of a move for sure, but I think you're probably right. A quarter, maybe 50 basis points on the high side.
As far as interest rates go with the home mortgages, I see those creeping up. Now they're back near about 7%. What is causing that, and should we be concerned for those people who are looking to sell a home, maybe downsize those people buying a home?
I think, Jeff, what that really is they're still saying we're in short supply on housing. And I just think that financial institutions are absolutely taking advantage of people because they know they can. Some people are desperate to buy, and I just think that they're doing that. Now, we've had some pressure in the bond market, which might have given them some reason to hedge a little bit at the banks, because if the 10-year Treasury bill goes up, which mortgages are tied to, that tends to lend itself to higher rates. But we've seen recently some decline there and some more stability, I would say. So maybe we'll see rates start to come down.
Talking with Randy and Jake Floyd of Floyd Financial Group. Our program, of course, is called Show Me the Money. We're talking about current events. We've talked about inflation. We have talked about mortgage interest rates. Let's touch on the market a little bit. Everybody knows the market has been extremely volatile this year. Do you expect that to be the case through the rest of the year here, or is there some point, or what's got to happen before the market settles down, do you think?
I got to be honest, Jeff. I think if we settle the tariff issue and the bond market remains at bay, it'll be very one-sided to the upside. Those are the only two concerns that I really have out there right now. And there's probably 25 things I could name that are huge tailwinds to the market. So part of the discussion on your last point there about interest rates and mortgage rates is the Fed knows to some extent if he cuts here, what will happen is the long end of the curve will go up anyway. And they don't want to lose control of this. And so I have a little bit different opinion, I think, than Randy. I think it's possible we may see them not cut at all, but they may start buying treasuries again, especially the long-dated treasuries that people are not wanting to buy right now. And if they do that, they really can't afford to lower rates and do that as strong as this economy is, because we'll end up at 5, 6, 7, 8% inflation before you know it again. And so if I had to guess with a crystal ball, I would say there's no recession and probably no rate cuts this year. But the Fed will at least back off of its bond selling program and maybe start buying depending on the situation with bonds. But I think that there may be a little bit more panic going into the expiration of these tariffs on July 7th. Trump has only really alluded to the one deal with the UK so far. If he does not show his hand on the rest of the deals he has done, if we get within like 10 days of that deadline, the market's going to start puking. And that's the technical term we call it for when the market really looks like a stream of puke going out to the side, so it kind of goes down. That being said, that will be a huge buying opportunity if that happens. And that may be the last chance you get before the rocket ship leaves the station.
Well, that's a great visual here for a Saturday morning, Jake. Thank you so much for that.
No problem.
Taco, I have seen that, and they're not talking about a culinary type of item. What is that all about?
Yeah, so taco is an acronym, apparently, for Trump always chickens out. I would take huge issue with that. I don't think that's true at all. I think people that are thinking that that's what Trump is doing are very misinformed or have a severe case of TDS, because that's definitely not what's happening. What he's doing is negotiating. And I would say that personally, so far in the China debate on trade, he has given a master class in negotiation. His ability to wait out the Chinese and bait out the things that he's making them do to get ultimately where he wants to go. I think we'll look back at this and it'll be taught in high schools and colleges and for decades to come. Again, you don't have to even like Trump to admit the fact that he is definitely a master negotiator. He's not chickening out. He is being merciful, both to us and to them. That being said, if the Chinese do not straighten up and fly right, he may have to bring the hammer. And I think he will do that with as great effect as he has brought the olive branch, if you will. And it's not about chickening out. It's about doing what's right for the American people. And one of those chicken outs that probably people would say is when he put the 90-day pause on tariffs. That was 100% to fix the bond market, which was on the verge of exploding. And Jerome Powell basically threw his hands up and said, hey, I'm not going to do anything about this. This is your mess. You clean it up. And so he was forced to side with the American people. I don't think that was a mistake. I think that was fine. And he's going to use that event to his advantage over the next 30, 45 days here. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. No, I don't think he's chickening out. I think if they want to find out, then they can keep doing what they're doing now.
Well, after all, he is the author of The Art of the Deal. Let's shift to tax policy. Of course, the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Here we are almost halfway through the year so far. It's scheduled to expire at the end of this year. 62% of taxpayers would be affected by that and could see increased taxes if it does expire. Any word on extending that so far? That seems to be the big elephant in the room at this point in time.
Well, the House has already pretty much given their seal of approval on getting that deal done. We're now basically relying upon the Senate to get that through. And of course, there's going to be a big fight, as there always is. But at the end of the day, I just don't see, if you're a Democrat listening to this show, which there's a few of you out there I know, I don't know how many, but how can you vote against it? You're going to pass the biggest tax whoopee on the American public that we've seen during my lifetime, and I've been here a couple of decades.
I would say, Jeff, personally, I think we have a 99% chance of extending the tax cuts pretty much indefinitely. I think most of the squabble will be over the other parts of the bill, the $1,000 per baby born and
Medicaid.
Right, Medicaid, the SALT exemption, all
SALT
that kind of
tax,
thing.
yeah.
I think that's where all the squabble is going to be. I mean, I think even a lot of the Democrats would vote to pass the actual tax extension.
Right.
It makes no sense to let that expire, and it makes no sense to put a new date on it. We're going to just pass it in perpetuity, and then maybe 4, 8, 10 years down the road, somebody else comes in and does something different. But I think virtually everybody wants those tax cuts to continue. I think the wealthy want that. The less fortunate want that because they get a massive standard deduction. That alone makes like 40% of Americans not pay any taxes.
Right.
So, I mean, those people who generally vote Democrat, by and large, they want that too. So I don't think there's really any danger of that not getting passed. I think it'll be the other things.
Yeah, and I also want to say this. I'm not sure how many people really understand what the SALT tax is and what that's about. So I want to just take a moment to clarify.
Yeah.
It basically is that you're able to deduct your state and local taxes off of your federal income tax. And so for me, I think the SALT tax is geared to penalize the federal government at the expense of the average Joe not benefiting from it, and the states that are charging the most egregious taxes getting all the benefit. You know, and those people that live there. So the New Jerseys, the Californias, the New York States, all those where the SALT tax is going to help those people much, much more because their state tax percent is much higher, and it cuts how much money goes to the federal government. At one point, it was $10,000. It was $20,000, I think. Currently, they're arguing $30,000, and maybe it needs to be $40,000 is what some are saying. That's an exemption. It's not a complete exemption. It's just a deduction from your gross income. So if the SALT tax allowance, if you've paid $20,000 in state taxes, you would take that $20,000 off before you calculate your percentage against your federal income tax, your taxable income. So it's just one of those things that the SALT tax is really designed to help those states that are already spending too much money and taking too much money from the people.
Talking with Randy and Jake, Floyd Financial Group. We've been talking about current events. And if you're listening to the program today and our conversation piques your interest, you'd like to come in and sit down and talk with Randy or Jake here at Floyd Financial Group about your individual situation, how these current events may affect your journey towards a confident retirement. We are offering this Floyd Financial Group Retirement Review. No cost, no obligation, no judgment to get yours. 417-889-7233. 417-889-7233. You can make that call this weekend. Leave your name, telephone number. Ashley will call you back during the week and set up that conversation for you. It's just a casual conversation. And again, it's not going to cost you anything at all. No obligation, no judgment. 417-889-7233. You can also find out more about us online at FloydFinancialGroup.com. Randy and Jake, time for a break. We come back here on Show Me the Money. We're going to be talking about 6 cash flow mistakes that many baby boomers are making with their retirement savings and how to avoid them when our program continues right here on 104.1 FM KSGF, where Springfield comes to talk.
back with your financial catch of the day. And it's a big one. Here's more Show Me the Money Radio with your hosts, Randy Floyd, Jake Floyd, and Jeff Shane.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Randy and Jake. You're listening to Show Me the Money. And in this segment, we're going to be talking about 6 cash flow mistakes that many baby boomers are making.
And Randy, I think a lot of people hearing this program today may be making these mistakes, but they just do not know that they're making a mistake. So the purpose of this segment is to enlighten them and to inform them, and furthermore, to give them some direction on how to avoid them. First one is underestimating longevity. And Randy, I think with the amount of movement that you do, the way you take care of yourself, I got you pegged for about 100 years old. What do you think?
I don't know. When you get out to that level, there's a lot of genetics that come into it. I'm not sure what my gene pool looks like for sure, but it is true that many times as I talk to people that are getting ready to retire and they're talking about how long they're going to live, or they ask us, well, how far out do you plan for? And we say, well, we always want to go out to age 90. And sometimes we even go to 95 and they go, I'm never going to live that long. And some people say, I don't think I'll even make 75. And then they go back to what their parents did and all that. So let me give you an example here. My mother-in-law will be 87 this year. And she was afraid she would never make 70 because neither one of her parents did.
Right.
You know, if you listen to all the stuff on TV and all that, we're not living as long as we used to. And I'm just not so sure that's true. If you go through and read all the obituaries, there's a whole lot of 85, 89, 90, 95, 100-year-old people out there. Yes, there's people out there that are dying early from cancer and things like that, and maybe an accident. But I would say this, if you're 65 and you're retiring, and you're married, the statistics say that one of you is probably going to live to 90. So you better be planning for it.
Right. And I've mentioned before, I have an aunt who is 107 and a half. She'll be 108 in January. And there's really no explainable reason for her living to be that age. It just happened. But, you know, now she's just on Social Security, but she's lucky because she has a family member around her. But we were talking off the air about 3 factors that will give you some sort of an indication as to how long you're going to live. Can you repeat what those were?
Yeah, so one is getting up off the floor without using your hands. Number 2 is hanging, being able to hang. Grip strength is what this is about for 1 minute. And the other one was your VO2 max, how much oxygen your body can really process through your musculoskeletal system is what it boils down to. So those 3 things will tell you a lot about it. So if you're one of those people, you can't get up off the floor without your hands, you can certainly learn to. It may take some time to do that. But VO2 max is something you just need a Garmin watch and a heart monitor and go out and do something, and it'll help you to determine what that is.
Well, you can also sit in a chair. That's another one that I used. You can sit in a chair and see how many times you can get up and sit down without using your hands. Do elbows count, Randy? If I'm on the floor, can I use my elbows? Is that technically okay?
I don't think so. But
okay.
And in fact, I'm not sure how you would use your elbows. You must have an incredible ape index.
I do.
Let me also say this. I think there's a lot of people that cannot get up using their hands. Right. And if you can't, that's okay. You should use your hands for now. Do some get-ups. It's good for you. Sit down, get back up, use your hands, and get to the point where you can do it without your hands. Right. So I don't want people to be listening going, well, I can't do that. I'm just screwed. No, right. That's definitely not true.
No.
And there's a lot of things like the grip strength thing, dead hanging. The average person probably can dead hang for 10 to 15 seconds. And that's across all age groups. Like most people can't do it. When I was doing a lot of CrossFit and things like that, I got up to about 1:10. Wow. Which is respectable, but it's not insane. Some of the guys that train at like the ninja gyms and things like that do a lot of upper body, they can do 5 minutes, 7 minutes, 10 minutes. But you might be surprised how little time you can actually do there before you give out. And again, working up to that is a good thing for sure.
Yeah. Case in point on the genetics things too. You know, Jake's grandmother on his mom's side lived to be 97. And Jeff, I knew her a long time before she died. And I'm telling you, the last decade, the woman did nothing but drink tea with milk in it and eat bread with butter.
Oh, my gosh.
You know, I think that the point is not allowing the gravitational effect of age to get you down.
Right. And the point of the conversation is that many people do underestimate longevity. They don't think that they're going to live as long as they actually do. So I think the takeaway here is to plan for a 25 or 30-year retirement using annuities or maybe longevity insurance or conservative withdrawal strategies like the 4% rule, which is really just a suggestion with some flexibility. So that is one of the 6 cash flow mistakes that many baby boomers make, is underestimating longevity. Next one is withdrawing too much too soon. How do we overcome that one, Randy?
Yeah. So, I think what we're getting down to here is you need to have a plan, right? So when you look at withdrawing money from your retirement assets and really deriving an income, most people have worked 20, 30, 40, 50 years, and they've always had a paycheck coming in. I'll never forget when my sister retired, and she retired with plenty of money and a great income, but she said, I'm on a fixed income. What do I do? So it's one of those things that we have to really work on a budget early on. And you're right. One of the things that we don't want to do is spend too deeply into our retirement savings, especially if we are toward the tail end of a market cycle. And we say, what's the tail end of a market cycle? Well, the market tends to run up, then it has to regather and it goes down. It has to run up, then it has to regather, it goes down. So that's a cycle that's always been and always will be. So we have to make sure that when we build our distribution plan, that we think of where are we in this sequence of returns? Where are we interest rate wise? Where are we in the market? And how much income do we need? So we need to really sit down and think that through and be sure that we have put ourselves in a position where we can earn the money we need to support our lifestyle, but also not take so much out that if we have a downturn, we cannot recover because we went too deep into our nest egg.
417-889-7233 is our telephone number. We're talking about 6 cash flow mistakes that many baby boomers make and how to overcome them. Again, 417-889-7233. If you'd like to get in on the conversation, sit down with Randy and Jake, talk about your individual situation, no cost, no obligation. Next one is failing to account for inflation. Inflation is 2.1% right now. It's pretty low, but what sort of inflation figure do you figure into your plans for the long term?
Right. So one guy asked me, he said, with this inflation rate that we had looking back over our shoulder, how do we plan for 8, 9, 10% inflation? And I said, well, you don't. You just can't plan for that. That's just impossible to do from an investment perspective. But one of the reasons the Fed has the mandate of 2% and maximum employment is let's keep Social Security funded. Let's keep all of our public systems funded. Also, let's keep inflation in check because at 2% every 36 years, we have to have twice as much money. So when we look at figuring out what inflation is going to look like, a couple things. If you retire at 65, you're probably going to spend more money between the ages of 65 and 75 on fun than you will from 75 to 80 or 90. However, we have to always take into consideration what healthcare costs might look like. But the thing to do is sit down. We'll do a budget today. We'll look at the nest egg that we have. And it's important that people start planning and thinking about this as soon as they can. And any age is not too early. The closer we get to retirement, the less time we actually have to make those last corrections and changes to get us where we really want to go. But inflation, if we're going to plan for it, 2-3% is what we generally will plan for because historically that's where it's been. Now, we've had some short-term inflation problems back in the late 70s and through the 80s, and then again with COVID. But for the most part, inflation has remained within that realm, and we can plan for that.
And hopefully it's going to continue that way. Let's continue our conversation here about baby boomer mistakes. One of them is not taking Social Security at the right time for you. How do we figure out, Randy, when is the right time to take Social Security?
That's the $64,000 question, Jeff. I mean, so it's one of those things that if we knew exactly when you were going to take your last breath, I could tell you exactly how to maximize it because we would turn it on at all these different dates and look at your last day to live and we'd figure out where the absolute sweet spot was. The problem is none of us know that. Now, sometimes there's a lot of factors that come into when we take Social Security. Maybe we're disabled. Maybe we just aren't able to work at the level that we were. Maybe we're having to take care of a spouse at home or something like that. But the thing to know is go in with your eyes wide open, sit down with somebody, and we can certainly help you do this. And let's look at what your benefits are at 62. Let's look at what they are at 64, 65, 67, at your full retirement age, which for most people today is somewhere between 66 and 8 months and 67. And what does it look like at age 70 if you want to work that long? So there's just a lot of factors to take into consideration. That's why there is no right age for everyone to take it. It's an individualized thing that we have to look at. What's your income? Otherwise, do you have a pension? What is your nest egg look like from maybe your 401k, your IRA? Maybe you have rental property. There could be lots of things that factor into that. So delaying is what most people would tell you, as long as makes sense to get the maximum from the government. However, we don't know how long we're going to live. So if we decide to wait till age 70 and we die at 71, well, we probably gave up 10 years of income, right?
Right.
That's the thing you have to factor in.
And it is one of those things that we help a lot of people with here at Floyd Financial Group, is when to take Social Security. Let's continue on to the next one here. It's neglecting RMDs, required minimum distributions. Randy?
Yeah, it used to be that when you missed your RMD, they wanted 50% of what you didn't take as an excise tax. They have taken that risk down now to 25%, but still, nobody wants to pay a 25% tax on the required minimum distribution. So the best thing you can do is work with someone to be sure that you get those set up, and even automated in some cases. Now, it's important that people know that if you have 3 IRAs and a 401k, and you are of that age now, 72 or 73, where you need to take your first RMD, you can take that from one account, or you can divide it up equally over several accounts, or however you want to. The biggest thing is have someone help you calculate your RMD and what it is, and then figure out where you want to take it from. You can do it equally or in any mix and match setup, just so you get to the right dollar amount, and that's the RMD, the required minimum distribution, and that's what you'll pay taxes on.
Okay, let's continue to the last one here, Randy, and that's over-helping adult children. This is something I see more and more frequently, where these are adult children, but then they go running to the bank of mom and dad. That could be a problem, couldn't it?
I don't know if you saw this recently. There was another poll done that said, when is the right time for children to leave home? And the number was 28.
28? Going to say, some of the kids I wanted to leave home at 12.
12 might be a little early, but
Get out, get a job, kid.
definitely 40 might be a little long to stay.
That's a little long.
There's lots of situations out there, and we see this a lot. I know one guy that had 2 children, and one of those children never needed or never asked for anything from their folks. And then the other one, it seemed like there was never enough money anywhere on the planet to satisfy what was needed. And then you got stuff all in between. The one thing I would say, there are kids, and we love them. We want to help them, right?
Sure.
But sometimes we're enablers,
Right.
not educators, by helping them. And sometimes the school of hard knocks is what people have to learn through. I mean, wouldn't it be amazing if we could take 12 and 13-year-olds and put 60 years of knowledge into their head with the snap of a finger?
Well, I think that, there should be I'm sure there probably is a class, but there should be a class where the kids have to figure out a budget, pretend that they're 30 years old, and that would really enlighten them as to how much things really cost, and the fact that maybe mom and dad do not have that money to help them. And if mom and dad does give them the money, that's certainly going to jeopardize their retirement. So this is a conversation, I think, that has a lot of psychological aspects to it. We're not a psychology show, but maybe we should talk about it one day. Talking with Randy and Jake, Floyd Financial Group, we've been talking about retirement mistakes that people make getting into retirement, baby boomers with their retirement savings, how to avoid them. Again, if any of these resonated with you, our telephone number, 417-889-7233. If you'd like to come and sit down and have a casual conversation with Randy and Jake about your individual journey towards a confident retirement. Again, it's not going to cost you anything, no obligation, certainly no judgment. We'll meet you where you are. 417-889-7233. Make that call today. Randy and Jake, time for a break. We come back here on Show Me the Money. We're going to be talking about artificial intelligence. It doesn't really cut it for financial planning. All that and more when our show continues here on 104.1 FM KSGF, where Springfield comes to talk.
People of the Ozarks, step away from the fishing pole and prepare to be shown the money, because we're back with more straight talk and honest answers with Randy Floyd, Jake Floyd, and Jeff Shea.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Randy and Jake. You're listening to Show Me the Money, and in this segment, we're going to talk about AI alone for financial planning.
And Randy, I have tried to use AI for my financial planning, or at least to give me some sort of insight as to what I should do. And it's going to spit out a lot of things, but it occurred to me, Randy, that these are just generic type of things because AI really doesn't have emotion. It doesn't know me. It doesn't know what my risk tolerance is. So what would you say to those people who say, well, I don't think I'm going to use a financial planner. I'm just going to use Chat GPT. What could they be missing right off the top?
Well, a lot of those programs, because I've kind of been curious about it myself. So I got there and say, so I am this age, I'm that, and what should I do? I'm sorry, Randy, I can't give you that kind of information.
Right.
is what it says, There are some tools out there that I know people are using and want to use. Here's what I would say. When it comes to building a customized plan that fits you, how much money do you have? How much money do you want to spend? Tell me about healthcare. Tell me about taxes. Tell me about your risk. Tell me about your estate plan, all those things. It's going to be very difficult, at least in today's world, to get all those answers and really make them make sense to you through something that is, like you said, a machine.
Right.
That's just really all I can say. They say that one of these days they will become sentient, which means they will know they exist, and then they'll be able to learn. But when they do that, we're probably done anyway, Jeff. So I mean,
right. Day is coming. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's important that people understand that the fact that we are emotional beings and that we change sometimes as often as we change clothing. And that's just something that AI is not going to take into account.
And AI cannot anticipate things like tax strategies, estate planning needs, or long-term care costs. And these are really some key factors that affect wealth over time. Also, investment risk, income, healthcare, estate planning, all these things really would align with what your personal goals are. AI simply can't do that. Also, would you say that AI kind of rests on set it and forget it investing?
I would say so because, and again, here we are, we're back to the emotion and the behavior. The old Dalbar study that was done years and years ago that talked about why individual investors don't make as much money as professional investors. And that was just simply the emotional and the behavior that their emotions drove people to do that cost them money, right? And so many times, too, people want to just boil down things to where, it's just, okay, we've got it boiled down. There it is. Now let's leave it alone. Well, the challenge is finance and markets and income and interest rates, they don't stay the same. And they're always changing based on different situations. And everybody's situation is different because some people have a lot of 401k money. Some people don't. Some people have rental property. And so just building a correct environment for a computer to even do what you want it to do is pretty difficult.
Well, AI really draws upon information that it can get on the internet. I don't know how updated that information is, Randy, but we talked about market volatility. Markets go up and down with the week or the day. And I would think that AI-based investing cannot react to those things. How often do you look at how up and down the market is or look at how volatile things are and adjust your financial strategy based on what the market is doing?
Well, just about every day. We're always watching because we're looking for the next indicator and looking at what it means and how it happened and why it happened and what are the factors that are pulling on certain parts of the economy. There's just so many, Jeff. It's a full-time job, believe it or not. Some people don't think that it is, but for those that try to manage their own money on a daily basis and have tried it for a while, they know it's a full-time job if you're going to stay on top of it. It certainly is.
And AI certainly does not know how frequently things change insofar as tax strategies. Right now we're looking for the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act to expire, but what if it didn't expire? What would AI tell us as far as what to do now? Because it really doesn't know what's going to happen in the future. So how do we handle, from a human standpoint, things such as estate planning and legacy planning and tax planning? Again, legacy and estate planning, those are more emotional things, but tax planning, it's really just kind of like black and white or shades of gray.
Well, it's true, except that everything is a moving target. And that's really the big part of it. And then all the things that can happen to us as humans that can be on a large scale predicted, but on the micro scale where we live, it can't be predicted at all.
Talking with Randy and Jacob Floyd Financial Group, we're talking about how artificial intelligence cannot replace the human financial advisor. Again, you have questions, 417-889-7233, 417-889-7233. If you'd like your Floyd Financial Group retirement review, no cost and no obligation whatsoever. We'll meet you where you are. Those phone lines open right now. Call that number, 417-889-7233. Leave your name and telephone number. Ashley will call you back during the week, and she will set up an appointment for you to come in and talk with Randy and Jake here at Floyd Financial Group. So, Randy, artificial intelligence cannot do everything. It doesn't have the ability to understand emotion. Let's talk a little bit about how a human being such as yourself at Floyd Financial Group takes into account emotion in financial planning. I've got a friend who's a financial planner, and one of the young people in the office asked him, well, how much of your day is spent financial planning? He said it was about 25%. And she said, well, what's the other 75%? He said, it's really more psychology and emotional. Is that the case with you folks at Floyd Financial Group?
Yeah, every time we meet with a new client or even an existing client, one of the things we're there to do is to see what has changed since we met the last time, or what that client's situation is coming in the door if they're new for us. No one size fits all is really out there. I mean, I guess you could say, well, we'll just put our money in CDs and forget it, or we'll just put our money here and forget it. But again, to do an effective job of helping people manage money, emotions, think about the emotions that come along. People say, well, Social Security, when should I take it? Well, sometimes there is emotion attached to that. You say, well, how so? If a guy comes to me and he says, man, I'm just so sick and tired of working, I don't want to do it anymore, and I'm almost 62, can I retire? Well, that's an emotional decision. Now, sometimes we have to talk people out of emotional decisions, but sometimes, too, we can help them complete the thought that they already had and help them manage that behavior that their emotions are driving.
Randy, how often do you have what I call hard conversations with people? I think people kind of want to gravitate towards what's easiest, or maybe they're going to gravitate towards the hearts and unicorns and stars, and this is what retirement's going to be all about for me. But then you've got to have this hard conversation with them about, based on what you have, here's the path that you're heading down right now. If we do not make some changes, I would think that's something that AI just can't do.
Yeah, and we have to have those conversations from time to time. I would say that, we live here in Middle America, the last bastion of sanity. And so a lot of people here are not living in the same world as maybe a Dallas or a California or an East Coast, where sometimes they're a little disconnected from reality.
I would say most people in this area are realistic.
Yeah.
I'd say maybe 15% of the time or so we have to have that type of hard conversation. And I think there's a lot of different hard conversations. That one's maybe 15% of the time. But like during the month of April, when markets were way down 21% in 6 weeks, I had quite a few people calling going, hey, get me out of this thing. Get me out of here. And I said, I will get you out if you want, but I think we should wait a few days because the market is oversold here. It's too far, too fast. And I had a few people that didn't listen, and I had a lot of people that did. And those that did were in for the 9th of April, when the market went up the largest point value ever in the history of the market in a single day. And some of that is just the discipline and the knowledge that comes with being here for 18 years, watching this thing. AI may try to advise you against that, but are they really going to be able to sit there and explain to you, okay, this is not a good idea to sell right now. Maybe you want to sell in a few days, fine, but let's not sell when the market's precipitously down 4%, 5%, 6%. 4% sequentially. When you have that, we call it a waterfall, or like we talked about earlier in the show, puking, right? Mm-hmm. When that's happening, the last thing you want to do there is sell, because you're due for a bounce. Maybe after you get your bounce, then you sell if you're really wanting to be more conservative. But by and large, time in the market is better than timing the market.
We're talking about the shortcomings of AI when it comes to financial investing with Randy and Jake Floyd of Floyd Financial Group. Artificial intelligence can be a great tool for some things, but I think when it comes to something as emotional as your retirement savings and where to put that, and certainly with the changing landscape of the markets and the economy, that AI can give you some general advice, but it is no substitute for a human being to sit down and talk to you, understand your wants, your needs, your goals, and your emotions in retirement. I'm sure that both of you have used ChatGPT. I use it, but just for fun stuff, like how much wood could a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? But the answer to that, Randy and Jake, is, according to a whimsical 1988 estimate by wildlife expert Richard Thomas, a woodchuck could chuck about 700 pounds of wood based on the amount of dirt that they move when digging a burrow. So why would
did they give like a time frame for that? Because that sounds like a lot of wood to me.
That's a lot of wood, but it says that woodchucks don't actually chuck wood. They're more into dirt, and they might manage 700 pounds if they gave it a go. So
one last thing I want to interject here.
Yeah.
So here's where we really are. If you remember Star Trek, and a lot of the people listening to this show will remember Star Trek, we had Mr. Spock, who was pure logic, which is AI, versus Captain Kirk. And so there were some things that made sense, but there were a lot of things that didn't make sense when you take the emotion out of it, especially for humans. And that's kind of where we live here, I think.
Well, I remember the episode in which I think Kirk said something. Spock said, "I can't believe my ears." And Kirk said, "I can't believe your ears either, Spock." So, again, if you'd like to have a one-on-one conversation with Randy and Jacob Floyd Financial Group to really get down to what makes you tick and what you're looking for out of retirement and a plan to get you there successfully, give us a call here at 417-889-7233. We would love the opportunity to sit down with you, have a casual conversation, listen to what you need in retirement, and try to craft a plan to get there. No cost, no obligation, no judgment. 417-889-7233. You can also find out more about us online at FloydFinancialGroup.com. Randy and Jake, we're going to take our last break. When we come back here on Show Me the Money, we're going to be talking about 6 effective strategies to help keep your heirs from blowing their inheritance and ensure your legacy is used wisely. When our show continues here on 104.1 FM KSGF, where Springfield comes to talk.
Ready for another helping of some more real money talk? Thought so. Now, here's another serving of Show Me the Money with your hosts, Randy and Jake Floyd, with Jeff Shea.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Randy and Jake. You're listening to Show Me the Money, and in this segment, we're going to be talking about 6 effective strategies to help keep your heirs from blowing their inheritance.
I would say that if you've got heirs that are 18, 19, 20, 21 years of age and you dump a lump sum on them, chances are they're not going to do the right thing with that money because they're not used to having money. They didn't necessarily earn it. So I think that really people want their heirs to inherit money so that it's going to make their life better. So let's talk about some of the strategies to prevent them from being a spendthrift, so to speak. And the first one is setting up a trust. How can a trust mitigate that problem?
Yeah, for sure. So, when we set up a trust, the thing that's nice about a trust versus just a beneficiary designation is that it can take into consideration all the things that could possibly go wrong. It also has all of the things in there that you want to go right spelled out very concisely. So what I mean when things go wrong, maybe someone dies out of order, or maybe someone gets divorced, or maybe someone gets remarried, or maybe somebody gets remarried several times and they have several kids and they got yours, mine, and ours. And we, all those things that come into play, the trust through an experienced estate planning attorney. We just happen to have one of those here through the Floyd Law Group that resides in the same building with us here, separate business, but resides in the building. And she can help you with that. So you can look at the trust set up to provide funding for special events in people's lives, maybe when they get married, maybe when they're ready to buy a house, maybe when they're planning for college, starting a business, all those sorts of things, as well as just a regular income. We've all heard of the trust fund babies, right? So everybody would like to be a trust fund baby, right? So it's one of those things that trust can really cure a lot of the ills that can happen. Now you have to be careful, and you need to have somebody that's experienced and understands all facets of not just creating a trust, but also administering one when you die, and how that gets done, and it needs to be thought through because there's many mistakes that we see made in trusts all the time.
Yeah, and it is very helpful that Elizabeth here at Floyd Financial Group handles all that for us right here in-house. So I think a trust is a good place to start, but there's also a spendthrift clause. Can you explain what a spendthrift clause is?
Yeah, it just basically protects the money that those people are going to inherit. It protects them from just going in and spending it. So you can say, well, you can get this much at my death, maybe a third or maybe 10%, 20%. You can set it up however you want when I pass away, and maybe the next batch doesn't come in until you're 30 or 35, and then maybe the next batch at 40, and finally when you're 50, you have it all. Or we can put in other clauses that say, hey, if you're on drugs, if you're disabled somehow, we can protect some of those funds for health care and that sort of thing. That can all be built into the plan.
Now, with a will, that can be contested, but what about a trust? If you put something like this, a spendthrift clause in a trust, Randy, and the person receiving the money doesn't agree with this, can they contest it, or is it as easy as contesting a will?
It's not as easy as contesting a will. However, anything can be contested. If you were to ask any attorney that's been an attorney, they'll say, well, anything can be contested, and that is true. However, many times we can include what's called an interim clause, or sometimes called a no contest clause that says, hey, if you try to buck the system here, you're going to get disinherited. And it's kind of funny, that word interim is just exactly that. It's in terror. It's spelled out. So we're going to put you in terror, of losing your inheritance if you buck the system.
So one of the things that you want to do sometimes with a trust is to set life goals. And can you give me an example of maybe some life goals that you would want to put into this trust as to when the person receiving this money is going to receive it for a particular purpose?
Yeah, sure. I mean, again, you can build any situation that you want there. Maybe it's when you think they're going to be graduating from college. Maybe it's a grandchild, because most likely your kids already have homes and things like that, right?
Right.
But maybe it's for grandchildren's education. Maybe it's for a home purchase. Maybe it's when they get married to kind of give them a little lump sum distribution. Or maybe you want to set it up to where they get a paycheck for the rest of their life and make that money go a long way. You can also set up a distribution to charities, to endowments, and things of that nature. So the trust gives you, really what it amounts to is the trust gives you control from the grave.
And that's a great thing to have, reaching out from the grave, shaking that finger, going, you're not going to buy that brand new Corvette when you need something else like an education or you need to support a new child.
Yep. So we know, Jeff, that you can't take it with you, but you certainly can control what happens to it when you're gone.
Talking with Randy and Jake Floyd Financial Group, we're talking about how to keep your kids from spending that money that they shouldn't spend the money on and ensuring their financial future. And this is really for their own good. I think that a lot of people may think back that are listening to the conversation today and thinking of a time in their lifetime when they got an unexpected bonus or something happened. Maybe it was a big tax refund, or maybe they came into some cash some other way and they spent it in some foolish way. And now we look back and go, boy, I wish I would have saved that money. I could have used more money for a down payment on a house or pay for a wedding or something like that. So as they say, hindsight is always 20/20. Let's talk about the trustee. Who do we pick as a trustee when we're setting up a trust? Should it be a family member or should it be someone who has no emotional attachment?
So here's what I would say about that. We've been hanging around attorneys and doing trusts for a very long time. If you aren't careful when you're thinking about picking a trustee, you'll put the fox in charge of watching the hen house. And what I mean by that is you got to really be careful as to who you pick. And if you're going to pick children who are also beneficiaries, the first thing I would tell you is that may be a bad idea. But number two, if you're going to do it, you need to give them, if there's two, you got to give them, equal share, or three or whatever. You need to give them equal share on how that decision gets made. But I will just tell you, everybody's situation is different. We have some people that would say, absolutely, my kids are going to be my trustee or my child is going to be my trustee. But I think it's a conversation you definitely need to have with your attorney when you're setting it up. Corporate trustees can be problematic as well. Sometimes corporate trustees, such as a bank, once they get that asset over there and they know they're going to be collecting their 1% per annum or whatever that is, plus the cost of writing checks and making distributions, they think that money is theirs and they don't ever want to let it go. Well, it's not their money and they will let it go. Okay. But it's one of those things that can really complicate the issue for the heirs. So it's just this very thing you're talking about here. How do we pick a trustee is a conversation you really need to have with your attorney when you set it up.
So, Randy, as you said, let's say that you have 3 children. One of them is the trustee. I would think that the trustee may have the power to change things, and I would think that that is a perfect recipe for a family that got along to not get along anymore. Can a trustee or does a trustee have the power to change things?
So it depends on what powers are given. Now, I'm not an attorney. I don't want people to think that I am, but it depends on what powers are given inside the trust. Generally speaking, if you got 3 trustees, if there's something that has not been spelled out exactly by the trust and there has to be a vote, majority will rule or something like that. But again, The idea would be to make the document as clear and concise as possible so we never, ever have to have these conversations.
So, Randy, I think a lot of people listening to the program today have decided, well, you make a lot of good arguments for a trust versus just a will, or maybe a will and a trust. They're unsure as to how to get started with this process. How do we get started if we want to have a trust? How do we get started getting this rolling?
Right. So you need to sit down and consult with an attorney. We have one here. Elizabeth Floyd can do that. But you need to sit down and consult with an attorney and just look at your situation and really see, because not everybody needs a trust. The vast majority, I would say, probably do, but not everybody does. And so, because everybody's situation is different, but you should sit down and explore what makes sense for you and what your goals are after you're gone.
So, Randy, as you said, not everyone needs a trust. In what situation would a will be good enough and not need a trust?
Let's say I have no children and I want to give all my money to St. Jude. I can pretty well do that easily with beneficiary designation and a will to cover anything that didn't have a beneficiary designation on it, like personal property and that sort of thing. But for the most part, most people have a more complex estate than that. And an estate, some people say, well, I've been told if I don't have $1 million, I don't need a trust. Not necessarily true. We just need to see what your situation is. Do we have a disabled child? Do we have a spendthrift child? Do we have spendthrift children? Do we have grandchildren we want to provide for in the future? There's all kinds of questions that come up that a trust will help you be able to navigate and be sure that those things happen after you're gone.
And our conversation about a trust here applies to estate planning, but let's briefly talk about legacy planning. I think those are two different things. Legacy is leaving your footprint here on this earth long after you're gone. Let's say that someone wants to earmark a certain amount of money for legacy purposes. Maybe they do want to set up a scholarship at their old alma mater or something like that, or they've got some sort of project that they would like to see continued with their name on it. Can we help them do that here at Floyd Financial Group?
Absolutely. You bet. We can do that.
And Randy, how can we go about doing that?
Yeah, you may be wanting to set up a foundation or an endowment, and that's just something that Elizabeth can walk through with people and talk about the benefits of that, maybe versus using a trust, and in what situation that actually makes sense.
Talk with Randy and Jake of Floyd Financial Group. We're talking about legacy planning. We're talking about estate planning. And in particular, trust and protecting heirs from being a spendthrift and blowing all the money that you've worked very hard for in your life. Again, if you've got questions about our topics today, 417-889-7233 is our telephone number. If you'd like to get in and sit down with Randy and Jake and talk to us here about your individual journey towards a confident retirement, we're offering to you at no cost and no obligation this consultation this morning, and certainly no judgment. We'll meet you where you are. So once again, it's 417-889-7233. You can also find out more about us online at floydfinancialgroup.com. Randy, I know we're here at the end of the show, but if people do call that telephone number, they want to come in, can you describe briefly what the initial casual conversation is all about? Basically just the first meeting.
Yeah, sure. So number one, the first thing we want to do is get to know people and basically find out where they are, what they're trying to accomplish. And we call that step one of our 5-step system, discovery. We want to learn about them and what's important to them, and then see if we can lend a hand to get them the outcome they're looking for.
Right, and you have the opportunity to ask us questions as well. We'll ask you questions, you ask us questions. It's really just to determine whether or not we can help you and whether we're a good fit. But again, we can't do anything for you unless you give us a call here at 417-889-7233. We would love to meet you. Well, Randy and Jake, we're out of time for this week. I want to thank you for your time, but most importantly, I want to thank our great listeners for joining us. So for Randy and Jake, I'm Jeff Shade. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you again next week right here with another edition of Show Me the Money on 104.1 FM KSGF, where Springfield comes to talk.
The information provided in the preceding program is for educational purposes only and is not intended as investment advice for any individual or entity. All information contained herein is believed to be from reliable sources. However, we make no representations as to its completeness or accuracy. The opinions expressed are subject to change without notice and do not constitute financial, legal, or tax advice. Please consult your financial professional before executing any financial strategy. Financial planning is offered through Floyd Financial Group, LLC, and